Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Michael's Corner. If you haven't done it already, you can follow me on social media. Facebook will be Michael's Corner, Twitter X will be at Michael Pam, and YouTube will be Michael's Wrestling Channel. And you guys can follow me on there. But tonight, I have a very special guest that will be joining me tonight. Um, Mike Kinney, aka Cowboy Magraw. Um, I'm going to invite him. I'm going to ask him some questions about, you know, his his long history with Aaron Corbin, as well as him making his announcement of coming out of retirement for his match. So that will be so excited. I cannot wait to get him on here because let me tell you, you guys, I am so excited. I I cannot wait to interview him. He's one of the nicest guys that I've seen yet. So let me invite him right now. Let's not waste any more time.
Hi,
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful. Thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to do this interview with me.
No, it's my pleasure.
So before we get started, for my audience that don't know who you are, can you tell my YouTube audience who you are and how did you get your start in wrestling?
Yeah, so about 17, I got to think about this really hard. 18 years ago, I had my last match as a professional wrestler. Up to that point, I'd wrestled for about 10 years. I was trained originally by a couple of guys out of Iowa. Then my more advanced training came from a couple of Ken Patera students, and I also went to a camp that was run by Harley Race and Ricky Steamboat. So in my 10-year period, I had about 500 or so wrestling matches, and people probably know me better and for my wrestling days as Cowboy Gator McGraw.
Okay. Wow. So you have a wonderful career as a wrestler and whatnot. But what made you decide to retire from pro wrestling and get away from everything?
Sure, yeah, near the end of my wrestling career, I had hurt my shoulder pretty bad. I was at a wrestling show in North Carolina, and I was wrestling as a guy that actually was from Ring of Honor. He wrestled by the name of Boogaloo, and he and I had done a move, and to this day, I'm not quite sure what the malfunction was, but essentially, I was dropped upside down, and I had stuck my arm out to stop the fall to brace the impact, and my shoulder had dislocated on the spot in the middle of the ring. We tried to finish the match the best we could, and then they took me to the emergency room. They got my shoulder put back into place, and I went back to wrestling right after that. And what was happening is at the time I was using a really really stiff clothesline, a lariat, as a finisher, and I started clotheslining guys so hard that my shoulder would dislocate in the matches, and so I had to. kind of pivot a little bit and come up with a different wrestling finisher for myself because I was hurting myself in the process. Over time, and this is about 12 months, about a year, I finally saw a doctor, and the doctor said, "Look, you're going to have shoulder surgery to repair the damage that's done inside there. We're going to have to open you up entirely. They couldn't do orthoscopic surgery, and they said it's going to be a long recovery road, probably about 6 months." And I said, "Okay." So I went and had the surgery, and I did the rehab, and I did all of that stuff for about 6 months. Went back to wrestling, and things just were never quite the same. I was a little bit more cautious about my shoulder because I had the surgery, and I just wasn't moving the same way that I was. Well, subsequently, I got hurt again, and over the course of the next year after I returned, my shoulder pain just got worse and worse and worse. And I finally was able to see a surgeon at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota. At the time, she was one of the surgeons that had done selective work on some of the Minnesota Vikings. So being able to see her was kind of a big deal. And she only took patients on a case by case basis. She met with me. They did a full rundown of what was happening with my shoulder. And she just straight up said, "Look, man, I can fix your shoulder. If we don't fix it, you're going to lose the use of your arm." I mean, my injury was so bad that I almost lost the use of my arm. And it's my right arm, and I'm right handed. And around the exact
Mhm.
same time, my wife and I found out that we were pregnant with our first child. And so to me, it was like, okay, all the signs in the universe are kind of pointing me in the direction of leaving wrestling. I'm going to have this surgery. I'm going to be a dad. And so that those were the exact two reasons that I ended up leaving the wrestling business.
Oh, wow. Wow, that's so well, like, you know, as a wrestler, you're putting your body on and your livelihood on the line to entertain these fans. And once that injury comes up, oh my God, it's like, wow.
Yeah,
So,
it kind of changes everything for you because for me at the time, my entire life, all I ever wanted to be was a wrestler. I remember being in Miss Smith's first grade class, and she had gone around to everybody and she said, "Okay, class, today I need you to draw a picture of what you want to be when you grow up." And you've got other children drawing pictures of doctors and firemen and lawyers and things like that. I drew Hulk Hogan. I wanted to be Hulk Hogan. And I remember her walking by and looking at my paper and then looking back at me and saying, "Michael, draw something else. A professional wrestler is not a profession." And it was like from that day on, I was like, "Oh, yeah, watch me." And I never wanted to do anything else other than be a professional wrestler. So when I got hurt and it was time to leave wrestling, I didn't exactly know where my life was going to take me at that point. Everything was going to be brand new. My identity was so wrapped up into being this wrestler that without professional wrestling, I didn't know who I was going to be anymore.
mhm. Yeah. So, I want to bring up this next question because, you and Aaron Corbin, you guys have a lot of history together. Can you tell my audience, what is, you know, what was your relationship between you and Aaron Corbin?
Aaron and I have known each other for about 25 years. Aaron was wrestling for a wrestling promotion based out of the Sioux City, Iowa area. At the same time that I was kind of running some shows of my own, and this is very early days of us breaking into the wrestling business. I was running some shows in southern Minnesota. So what was happening was that this promotion in Iowa and then the promotion I was running, we were this like the feuding promotions, WWF versus WCW style.
Okay.
And Aaron had been fired from that promotion in Iowa, and he had reached out to me and he said, "Hey, I need a place to land. I want to come and wrestle in Minnesota." And I said, "Great, we'd love to have you." And it wasn't that long after Aaron packed up his car, he with all of his belongings, and he moved from this area in Iowa that he had grown up in, completely relocated to Albert Lee, Minnesota, where we were kind of based out of at the time. And I mean, he uprooted his life just to chase his wrestling dream. And had he and I not had that conversation, that probably would have never happened. Aaron's had a very beautiful life since then. He's got a beautiful daughter. He had met his wife through the wrestling stuff that we were doing. So it was like, man, his life would have turned out so much differently had he and I not become friends and all those years ago. At one point, Aaron and I had lived together. There were several of us wrestlers that had lived together at the same time. One of the O'Neill twins, and there were a number of others. We all kind of lived together. And when we weren't working our day jobs, we were all together studying wrestling tapes or trying to learn as much about the wrestling business as we could. It was almost like a pro wrestling fraternity, if you will. And that went on for 3-4 months, and it was a lot of fun. And we all started to kind of go our separate ways. We were training together also. We were driving back and forth to Midwest Pro Wrestling's training camp in St. Louis Park, Minnesota, from hourly. So 2 or 3 days a week, we would drive 2 hours each way to go train in the ring. And then when we weren't doing that, we were together studying tapes and studying the wrestling business. So we were just immersed in all of that. And as we continued on in the wrestling business, Aaron and I traveled together quite a bit. We were on the road extensively together. We traveled out to Indiana. We worked some IWA Mid South shows. Those were Ian Rotten shows back in the early 2000s. We were kind of all over the place together. So he and I, we definitely have a storied history together, personally and professionally.
Okay, so I want to, you know, be transparent about this. And when you was at a MAW show, there was a little incident between the both you guys where he kind of, you know, came, I believe was after the match that he just came out and, kind of like walking towards you and whatnot. And he kind of shoved you. So, can you tell me how did you feel about Aaron just putting his hands on you because you was only trying to be a wrestling fan and him putting his hands on you? How did that make you feel? Because it must have made you feel kind of, you know, deep down inside, you kind of felt like you're hurt or whatnot.
I was embarrassed. My pride was certainly hurt. I think it's important to go back in our history just a little bit. So Aaron and I started to have a bit of a falling out around 2005. Now, keep in mind, I got out of the wrestling business in 2007. Aaron and I got into this unnecessary argument, probably over nothing, the summer of 2005. It was right before I got married. And it wasn't a fight, it was an argument. And the argument that he and I got into was so intense that I ended up uninviting him to my wedding. He was not allowed to be there. And I know that hurt him. And I know that, the past is the past and things like that. And he also had stated, after this incident, and I'll touch on here in a minute, that when I left wrestling, it's important for everybody to understand is that, like anything that's bad for you, but you hear like, cigarettes are bad for you. You should quit smoking. And in my mind, wrestling was really hurting me because of my shoulder, because of my time on the road, everything else. So naturally, I thought I need to quit wrestling altogether. So when I left wrestling, I distanced myself from it. I stopped watching it. I didn't talk to any of the people that I knew from my wrestling days. I wasn't involved in the wrestling business whatsoever. I quit it cold turkey. And there's a couple of things I didn't realize that I did unintentionally. Number one, I was hurting myself pretty bad. I talked a minute ago about self identity, and I had my whole life was wrapped up in being a wrestler, and all of a sudden it's just not there for me anymore. And
Mhm.
I became very depressed. and it was really impacting my life, and I became an alcoholic, and I had to, I was like self-medicating, and I didn't realize why I was so sad, um
Mhm.
and then now on the other side of that, Aaron has told me that he was very offended that the way I left wrestling. He said it felt like a divorce, the way I stopped talking to the other wrestlers, and it was never, the way I quit wrestling was never intended to hurt anybody. It was meant to actually help me move forward in my life. But it's very recently that I've realized that some people were hurt in that process, and even though I didn't mean to do that, it still happened. And so I think what happened with Aaron and I, at this MAW show earlier this year, was still kind of stemming from some wounds from almost 20 years ago. Now, I went to the show with every intent. I bought a ticket. I walked in. I sat in the front row. And the thing was, is that this is the craziest part. I knew Aaron was on the show, and I wanted to surprise him, and which is why I was sitting front row. And I thought it was going to be kind of a great thing to meet up with an old friend again, and just see how he's been, and talk to him, and just catch up with him. And so yeah, he said something. So he left the ring at the end of the match, and he walked by me, and he kind of said something, and I had stuck my hand out to, so he'd smack my hand, he'd give me a five, and he wouldn't do it. And he stopped, and he turned around, and he came back, and he started saying something to me, and I didn't know exactly what he was saying. And before I knew what had happened, was I was sitting in my chair. He had he had come forward and pushed me with both hands, and I kind of flipped over into the people behind me. And naturally, I was upset, and I went after him. I probably shouldn't have, but my pride was a little hurt, and I was embarrassed. And I he put his hands on me, so I went after him, and I don't know what I was going to do if I got a hold of him. Lucky, luckily there was security there. Um,
Mhm.
but the whole thing was really avoidable, and it was over nothing.
Yeah, yeah. I can tell that, sometimes Aaron has a problem, keeping his emotions in check. Because I also know him for a lot of years. And, he just has the problem controlling his emotions. He doesn't know how to control his emotions. So, like me, like I let my emotions get the best of me, I say some stuff that I really don't mean, But but yeah, I can tell Aaron I know Aaron Corbin, And if I was at that show, I will guarantee, I promise you, I'm the only person that can make him just walk away. Walk
Well, I,
away.
I believe you, and it's too bad you weren't there. And I think, just a second ago you said that, we all kind of make mistakes, and sometimes the anger gets the best of us, and that's so true. The difference is that I think, Michael, that you're probably one of those people that, like, when you do something wrong, you come forward and you say, you know what, I screwed up. That was my fault. That's on me. You take responsibility for your actions. And that's been my biggest problem with all of this, is that not only has Aaron not taken responsibility, he's actually continued to make it worse. He's saying things because he didn't think I was going to come back. He didn't think I was going to talk to Eli about trying to get a match with him to shut him up, and I think that's where we're at now. I think now that Aaron knows that I'm coming for him, he's been very quiet. He's been very quiet.
Hmm. So, what made I don't want to. I hate to change the subject, but we'll come back to that. But what made you decide to that you want to just come out of that retirement? Because I know you and we talk on Facebook Messenger back and forth, saying that because I enjoy it's like every time I go to wrestling shows, I think I always see you at shows and whatnot, seeing you have a good time and whatnot. But what on earth made you decide to come out of retirement?
Oh, that's a very good question. And if I had a straight answer for you, that would make my answer incredibly easy. I think that there's a couple of things that are happening. I told you before that the universe was telling me it was time to leave, and all of the things were kind of
Mhm.
lining up in that way. And I think I'm at the point in my life now where things are kind of saying it's never too late to go back and make things right. Because when I left wrestling, I didn't get to leave on my terms. I was kind of forced out. Now I got a really, really lovely send off, but it wasn't on my terms, and that's never really set well with me. And that's something I've always thought about. I also told you before that I struggled with alcohol. This October will be 10 years that I've been sober. So this is a very, very big year for me. And I was working with some filmmakers about making a movie about self identity and professional wrestling. They were already working with me. They had started coming to some of the shows with me and shooting some of the footage. And lo and behold, this opportunity with Aaron just kind of fell in my lap. So now we're in a position where it's like, okay, maybe we can still tell that story about redemption, about finding your self identity, about never being too old to live your dream. And I can tell that story through my journey back to the ring. So the film crew, they've been following me training at gyms. They've been, coming to my home and seeing how I'm preparing for the match. They are kind of a shadow to me right now, trying to understand where my mind is at. And along the way, I know they're filming some interviews with some sports psychologists. They're filming stuff with other wrestlers from MAW as well, trying to understand where they're at. So it's not just about Gator and Gator's return. It's really about the mental health side of having lived your dream up until because we're all told, Michael, we're all told you can be anything you want to be, and that's fine and all. But what if all of a sudden you can't? Then what's the next plan? And that next plan thing, that's the part that's never taught to us, and that's what this film is going to cover, is when you've outlived your dream and you have to make adjustments. What's that do to your brain? Who are you at that point? And so I think it's going to be important to not only follow my journey back to the ring, but also, looking at guys like the Paul Verks and things like that of the world as well, so that they
Mhm.
can look at the different generations of professional wrestlers and other athletes as well. This isn't just about professional wrestling, but so I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's a good answer because yeah, it's great that you're doing this. So not only on your return to action, but you know, you're giving other wrestling fans the opportunity to go inside, you know, what you know, what's happening in the wrestling world. And I think I can't wait for fans to see that and whatnot. And I can't wait to see that either. So I'm looking
Yeah.
forward to that.
Yeah, if fans are interested in getting involved, we would love to have as much help as we could. We're trying to raise some money for the film. Right now, as of right this second, there's a Kickstarter that we have launched where there's all kinds of different rewards and things like that for people who want to be involved in the film or get a deeper peek behind the curtain into what we're doing. But there's all kinds of really cool rewards they can get as well. There's a Gator Magraw micro brawler that's an option. We're working with several artists on different things like trading cards and painted turnbuckles with some Gator McGraw information on it, some exclusive, excuse me, some exclusive T-shirts. There's all kinds of really cool stuff there. So if anybody's interested and no dollar amount's too small really to help us out, and you get your name in the credits. Um, it's at strictlygator.com. That is the Kickstarter. And yeah, there's just all kinds of ways for people to get involved. I would love a year from now for the film to be done and for MAW to host like the premiere. We do like a red carpet premiere for people to buy tickets to, and you can get your picture taken out on the red carpet before you watch the movie for the first time. And there's all kinds of really fun stuff we can do with it that we're playing around with in the background. But at its core, I want to be able to give back to professional wrestling as much as it gave to me, and I think that this film is a great way to honor that.
Yeah, yeah, and that is, that is so exciting, and and I just can't wait for, the film to be out in a year and whatnot, because I'm gonna be there,
Well,
you
good.
know, and whatnot. So, um, like, so what do you think of, and what do you think of today's indie pro wrestling? Do you think it has evolved from some odd years ago when you was in it, or do you think that it needs some adjustments? If you know what I'm saying.
I do know what you're saying. I think there's a lot of really good changes that I've seen that have taken place. There's stuff that's happening behind the curtain that you wouldn't necessarily notice that I've noticed. Wrestlers are just, they treat each other with a little bit more respect than I remember. Not that wrestlers were disrespectful back then, but the activities that happen behind the curtain, pranks and things like that, I haven't seen them as being as prevalent as they were when I was more involved in the wrestling business. And the activities that they're doing, it's less about the party scene now and more about comic books and video games and things like that. That's the stuff that the wrestlers were into and they're talking about backstage. Not so much where the after parties at or anything like that, where like it was when I was around. So, um,
Mhm.
but but also the business has also had the opportunity to evolve in a way that benefits the wrestlers. And what I mean by that is when I was traveling, there wasn't a lot of money to be made on the independent circuit. We were making maybe, anywhere from $20 to $50 per show, um, which isn't hardly anything when you're driving 4 hours each way from your home, right? So
Right.
I used to try to sell as many T-shirts and miniature cowbells and autographed 8x10s and all of that stuff. I would have to carry it with me in a separate suitcase or a separate tote or something like that and lug it around to all these shows to try to make a little bit of extra money on the side. The beauty about how the internet's really helped out wrestling now is they don't need to lug around all that merchandise anymore. They can have a QR code. You can order one of their T-shirts from some place like Pro Wrestling Tees or wherever it is. There's just a lot more opportunities for wrestlers to be able to get their merchandise out there faster, not have to handle a lot of cash, and to make a substantial amount of money on the independent scene without having to go and buy all of the T-shirts and things like that in advance that they might need to sell at a show. It's really kind of wonderful. So those are some of the advancements that I've seen. But all of the changes I've seen in wrestling so far, in my opinion, have been very positive.
Mm-hmm. And what do you think? I mean, like, as a fan, what do you think? You know, you seeing all these wrestling podcasts out and whatnot, and mine's truly, I've been interviewing wrestlers for a lot of years. Maybe May of 2013. What do you think about all these wrestling podcasts that is out there now? What do you think about that?
Well, and we can throw my name in the hat on that as well, because next month we're relaunching my podcast as well. So, and while it won't be all wrestling related, it certainly be a lot more aligned with the mental health side of things, the self confidence side of things, which is what my TED talk was actually about. Um, I think that there's so much information out there when it comes to podcasts that the people who are hungry for knowledge really have to kind of filter through what specifically it is they're looking for because there's so many options, and people who are doing podcasts need to have some kind of gimmick of their own that sets themselves apart from their competition. Whatever the genre is that they're doing, if it's interviewing wrestlers, there's other podcasts that are doing that. So you got to think about from a marketing perspective, what makes you different? What makes yours special? Why should people tune in to see the questions you ask? And how is it different than any of the questions that are asked anywhere else? So that's some of the stuff that from a marketing perspective, I think that would be helpful for all podcasts to think about. Don't do stuff that gets you excited as much as you should be doing stuff that sets you apart in the marketplace. I
Hmm.
mean, that's how I came up with the cowboy character. At the time, nobody else was doing a cowboy character in Minnesota at all. And I knew that if I was any kind of character like that on a show, people would remember me. And for the most part, they did. And so I think that, when you look at it through the lens of a marketing brain, you have to go,
Hmm.
okay, I don't necessarily think I'm a cowboy, but I do have to make myself different from that guy and that guy and that guy over there because I want people to remember me and to focus on who I am. So podcasts are the same way.
Yeah, yeah. Um, a lot of thing I want to bring up is how how do you deal with, like, I mean, now, like back in the day, there was no such things as, smartphones or social media or anything like that. And how do you deal with, like, if the fans were to say like negative stuff about you and whatnot? How do you know, process all of that and whatnot?
That's actually a great question. I've never been asked that before. Um, Truth be told, I am human also, and I have feelings, whether people believe that or not. So sometimes it's very easy, just like anybody else, to look at that. A lot of times I get made fun of for my weight, or I get made fun of because here I am out in the universe trying to do some really like cool things with wrestling, but people are like, "Who are you? You've never been anywhere. You've never done anything important." And it's like, well, hold on a second here. Like, who are you? You're just some guy behind the keyboard that's never actually been in a wrestling ring. So a lot of times it's really really difficult to separate your personal feelings from what some of these people have to say about you online, and you have to remember that their opinions in a lot of ways don't matter. They probably have low self-esteems or something like that, and a lot of it really stems from jealousy. When my TED Talk went live, over 1.5 million people have seen it. And on YouTube, I made the mistake of going through the comments and looking at see what people had to say about me. And I stopped doing that over time because it was frustrating me because nobody, you know, dwells on the good stuff. They always want to post about the bad. So a lot of mine was about being, people making fun of me for being overweight and being a nobody loser in the pro wrestling industry. And, you know, it's hard sometimes to get the suicide rate for some influencers. There's a young lady who just very recently committed suicide, who was an influencer, who people
I
were
think
making,
I heard about that.
yeah,
I'm
people
sorry.
were making
I
fun of
think
her
I heard
online.
about that.
And so uh, other human beings have to realize that the influencers or the people who are putting their name out there are taking risks and chances on themselves. They have feelings and they're probably going to see what you have to say. And if you don't, like, it's like your mom teaches you when you're very young, you don't have anything nice to say, don't say it at all. And unfortunately, the internet gives people the ability to say a lot of mean things and be anonymous while they're doing it. And
Hmm.
so that's really where it's at. And I have kids now too who get picked on in school, and you try to just like talk them up and give them the best advice you can because you don't want them to get hurt either. But the
Hmm.
reality is that you never really outgrow the damage that people can do to you with their words. You just have to
Yeah.
really understand what's true in your heart and what is a bunch of nonsense.
Hmm. Yeah. And I think what what the problem is today is they so pimped up on, you know, they just want to tear each other down more instead of lifting each other up. And that's what the problem we face in this world right now is people are always they always jump to conclusions,
Yeah.
like just because they saw this on TV and whatnot, and they all jump to conclusions. They don't take the time to just stop, and think about what you're gonna say. Stop, pause, and just think about what they say. But these people, they're just gonna say whatever it is on their mind, no matter what the consequences they might face later. But oh my God, we need to do we need to these kids just needs more education. They need to focus more on, schoolwork and whatnot, or reading instead of being playing on their phones and doing going out there doing illegal bullshit. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it goes back to what's the golden rule: treat people the way you want to be treated.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's very
And I
important.
think and I think these the younger generations doesn't get that golden rule, you know?
Yeah, I think in some ways you're probably right. I think that some of that probably has to do with all of the ability they have to communicate with each other through social media and things like that. But I'm going to tell you, I grew up in the 80s and 90s. Bullying was still very much a thing. It was just done in a different way, and so it's always been around. People always are going to have something to say about somebody else. But like I tell my kids, it's you have to control what you can control. We cannot control what other people say or do or think or feel or anything like that. You worry about you. And if you can get that much under control, which frankly, not a lot of people can actually control themselves, if you can do that much, then you're already ahead of the game.
And that's what dates back to what one of the wrestlers who I interviewed either last year or 2 years ago. You can't control what people can say about you online, but what you can control is how you respond back to those people.
For sure. Yeah. And you know
Mhm.
what? If we want to take it another layer, if it comes down to the wrestling stuff and it comes to being, some kind of influencer or wrestler online or entertainer of any kind, it boils down to, the old school mentality is if they're not talking about you at all, then you're not doing your job. So even if they are saying some mean and nasty things, at least they're talking about you. Now, I don't know.
Exactly my point.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
what I think. So like everybody was thinking about, oh, he's one of the most controversial wrestling fans I ever seen. I said, you know what? I'll just look at that and say, well, at least they're talking about me.
There you go. Yep. You're right. You're
So
right.
my one final question, because I know you got a lot of things to do, and so do I. Um, so all right. Hmm, If I mean, like I know you wrestling Aaron Corbin or whatnot, but let's just say that if you were to get back in the ring, like let's just say get back in the ring on a, you know, full-time basis and whatnot, who do you want to step in the ring with if given the opportunity?
That's a fun question. Can it be anybody?
It could be anybody.
Okay. I would pick Brody King.
All right.
So Brody King is in AEW. He's a very, very big guy. He's part of the House of Black. I when I watch him wrestle, all I can think about is like, man, me and him would have a heck of a battle. We'd probably bleed all over the place, beat each other senseless, and find some mutual respect somewhere in the middle. But guys like that, Those are the ones that I always had the most fun kind of wrestling because it would just turn into an all out brawl and we would be able to just get in there and get nasty. So yeah, I think if I had my choice, if I was coming back full time in full health and full capacity, I would be shooting to wrestle somebody like Brody King.
Now, on the indie side, who do you want to face? You mentioned Paul Vert.
Yeah,
Oh my goodness, he's good. He's
Paul Virk is
really
good.
he's a really good wrestler, and you should face him next because he he's also he's a great guy. He respects the wrestlers and you know he has a bright future in this business. Let me tell you.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. I think if we're talking about specifically kind of the Minnesota area and some of the guys that come around our territory, if I was coming back to wrestle full time, I think I would really want to wrestle. You know, Paul Verk's great. I think Joey Avalon is someone who
Oh,
would really complement my style quite a bit. We'd be able to just he's another one, you know, full blown Haas match, man, and just pound on each other a little bit.
can I tell you something funny? What Joey Jet Avalon did to me at wrestling shows, and this was 2, 3 years ago.
Okay.
So every time, like I sit in the front row, he rather if he's wrestling as a heel, if I'm booing Joey Jet Avalon, if I boo him, he, he would get out of the ring and he'll come to right where I'm at and he'll just get into my face. And we would have a little face off. And guess who won that face off?
Well, it's got to be you.
Me.
Of course it was.
Yes, I won the face off because I could get under the skin of any wrestler and I will always win. Garrison Creed, he got into my face when he was actually when he was babyface. He got into my face, and guess who won? That face off, me.
Wow.
Because the I'm telling you, it's like these are big dudes. Okay, these are big dudes coming into my face, and I was like,
You've got the confidence though. Like you
I
win with
got the
you got the confidence
confidence.
game. That's it. See?
Yeah, so that's a fun fact. So Joey Jet Avalon, he's one, he's a lot of great wrestler, and who I would love for you to step in the ring because I'll be filming that match, and it's like, oh yeah, it's gonna be
Well,
right on my YouTube channel the next day.
you never say
So
never, but the odds of me coming back for more than one match are let me put it to you like this. You have a better chance of winning the Powerball than me having a second match. But again, you never say never.
that's right. Well, I just want to thank you for doing this doing this interview with me and taking your time because yeah, it's like I want people to watch this interview and be like, "Oh my God, Michael hit some very good points and whatnot." So again, where can fans follow you on social media so that I can put in the description on YouTube?
Sure, sure. Well, the Kickstarter goes through July 21st or 22nd, 2025. So if you're seeing this after that, I'm sorry, but the Kickstarter had ended. If you see it before that, that is at strictlygator.com. You can always go to my website at kinneyconfidence.com, or you can find me on the social medias at Gator Magraw. That's Magraw, not McGraw. And you can follow me on Instagram, Facebook. I have a YouTube channel as well. My podcast, Wrestling with Tomorrow, which is also the name of the documentary, will relaunch in July of 2025. So I've got a lot of fun things planned with that. So I'm all over the place, and I hope to have a lot of you fans tagging along with me. Thank you for having me, Michael. This has been great.
Oh, Yeah, we should. Yeah, and we should do this again because this is awesome and whatnot. And yeah.
I would love that.
All right. You have a good night.
Thank you. You too. Bye bye.
Bye.